Hello, you beautiful musicians, and welcome back to the Musician Guidance Podcast. If you're new around here, my name's Mac. I'm the founder of Musician Guidance and co-host of today's podcast, joined alongside my fellow host and creative director at Musician Guidance, Ben Penner. Ben, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mac. It's a pleasure to be here to host my first podcast with you. So
definitely, yeah, that must be quite exciting for you. And I know we're both excited for today's episode because we're joined alongside someone that we're truly honored to share the floor with. He is a radio programmer, researcher, consultant, and president of Kroeger Media, an international media company that specializes in 24/7 programming, licensing, and branding for radio that broadcasters can afford and understand. The company is known for the creation, development, and licensing of Bob FM and Hank FM radio brands. Along with having their own successful radio brands, their work can be heard in over 100 markets across North America and abroad. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce you all to Howard Kroeger. Howard, thank you for taking the time to hop on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, great, Mac. Ben, good to talk to you guys. And I was really excited to be invited on this podcast of yours. I think what you guys are doing is absolutely amazing. Before I got into what I do for a living, I was a struggling musician. And I mean, this was back before you guys were born. But we did the whole thing. We quit our jobs. We went on the road. We had a single. We did all that stuff, right? And times haven't changed much. Well, I mean, the industry certainly changed, but one thing is not changed is that being a musician is a tough gig, and usually we were broke. So I wish we would have had the ability to be able to access tools like what you guys are doing and hook us up with people who could mentor us and so forth. And I think what you guys are doing is really, really good and very, very needed too. So kudos to you guys for coming up with this concept and this model you guys work. I think it's brilliant.
You're too kind. Thank you. We really appreciate it. And I know the musician guidance community is filled with artists that are, either wanting to get their songs on the radio or just simply learn more about the process, and guidance from yourself today can certainly help them achieve that. So on behalf of the community, Ben and myself, we're super excited to pick your brain and learn from your vast experience. Before we dive into all of that, though, I would like to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself, Kroeger Media, and how you got started with it.
Okay. My old life, this is when my goal was to be a professional musician when I was, ever since I was a little kid. In fact, in my, in my little books that I used to keep, rock star was always, was always up. Anyway, it's something that, being a musician, it never goes away. In fact, as we speak right now, I'm in the process of, we're actually building a new recording studio, production studio behind our house right now. But my journey from being a musician to what I do today, it's been very, very interesting. Alongside with my passion for music, I've always been fascinated, or always was fascinated with radio. And I thought that, being a radio announcer or disc jockey is, something that I really, really wanted to pursue. And I eventually did. And I was an announcer for, I guess I started in about 81. And that was my first, that's like 41 years ago now. I was very, very young. Yeah. I was a radio announcer, started off at a small market station in Winkler and Morden called CISV back in about 1981, 82. And in between then, I got the musician bug and I left, and I went on the road with our band. And after being on the road for 9 months and having not a pot to pee in, I decided, well, I have to find a way to be able to finance my life. So I took another choice at another low-paying profession, and that was radio. And I eventually got hired as the all-night jock at Q94. And that's where I really cut my teeth. It was a fabulous place to work. I eventually, worked my way up from the all-night jock to music director, program director, eventually operations manager. And I had a great run there. It was just a great company to work for. These guys were, they were cutting edge. It was owned by the Waters family. Chum Broadcasting. And these guys were just like salt of the earth people. They allowed us to grow. They gave us the ability to make mistakes, which is very, very important. And it was just an amazing run. It was an amazing company to work for. In 2006, which ironically, the company was sold, I think that year as well. I actually left my full-time job there as ops manager and program director of Bob and Q94 FM to go on my own. In 2002, I had created this format, radio format called Bob, while working at Chum, and it became quite successful. It's one of those things of being in the right place at the right time. It ended up being the first adult hits formatted radio station of its kind in North America, or even the world, I guess. And basically, it was the success of that venture that convinced me that maybe my time might be better spent working on and developing my own ideas. And so I decided to leave. And what I did is I took the Bob format, which I own in the U.S., and I took it. I franchised it in the U.S. And today, we provide the Bob format and a country version of the format called Hank, as well as a commercial production service called Spot Voltage that we license out to about 100 markets across the U.S. And we are represented by a company out of New York called G Networks. They have offices in New York and Cleveland. And these are the guys that, sell and license our formats and services for us. And today, my sons, Travis and Lucas, they produce the content we provide. And they basically, their job is to make their old man look good. I'm the voice of the Hank station. And and I didn't become the voice of the Hank station out of ego. It was more out of I couldn't afford anybody else, so I figured I'd try and give it a shot myself. And so that kind of took on a life of its own, and that opened up doors to doing voiceover work as well, which I still do a fair amount of. But my sons Lucas and Travis, they produce all the content we provide. They also have production work outside of Kroeger Media. Travis produces the Wolfman Jack show, and he also produces Lou Dobbs financial reports. And Lucas does a lot of production work for G Networks as well. So basically, actually, the truth be known, my sons, I've always considered them production ninjas. And as far as radio goes, they really don't know how good they are because they've only ever worked for me. I mean, they both studied audio engineering, and then right after that, Travis had a few other jobs that he did, but Lucas came and worked for me right away. And I'm the only boss Lucas really ever had. I don't know if that's good or bad, but no, these guys they've done very well, and it's great to be able to work with your it's great working with your kids. It's of course it's the balance of being their father and their boss, but we do it pretty good. So that's my bit of the background of what I do and where I've come from.
Nice. So as you mentioned, you have your Bob and Hank FM stations playing in over 100 markets in the United States. I was just curious if you could delve into it more about what goes into setting up those stations in each region, and if there are any unique factors depending on the region you're setting up in.
A good question, Ben. So basically, like it's it's become fairly simple. Like what happens is that we are well, actually, all of our stations are U.S. based, and we operate them here from sunny LaSalle, Manitoba. And basically, what happens is that the internet really democratized things for a lot of people, including program delivery. And over the years, what we did is we were able to come up with a delivery system that basically allowed us to be able to put together all the elements of a radio station and send them out to clients over the internet. And that's basically how we deliver all of our formats right now. So basically, what'll happen is that we'll get a call from somebody who wants to set up a Bob FM or a Hank FM, and what we'll do is, I mean, we've done it hundreds of times, so we've got a pretty slick, we can turn it around pretty quick. So what we'll do is we look at the market, we take all of the local elements in the market, and we take all of the elements to things that we know work in other markets, and we basically create a radio station for them. We build the clocks, we build the categories, we build all of the imaging. Our network is set up so that we have somebody in Panama City, Florida, helping us with the with the scheduling of the music. We've got our voice guy for Bob in Clearwater, Florida. We have Travis and Lucas living in different parts of Winnipeg, and we got me in LaSalle. And I mean, distance is absolutely it's not an issue, right? So anyway, so what'll happen is that if somebody wants a Bob format, we put it together for them, and what I'll do is I'll send it out. I don't have one to ship. Well, I'll send it out. I can actually bounce it onto a little thumb drive. I FedEx it to them. They load it into their system. We make sure that the elements that we produce for them are all spec'd to the kind of automation system that they run. And after that, yeah, we're off to the races. There's their radio station, and we'll provide them with the ability to schedule the music, and if they want to insert their announcers, they do it all on their end. So I mean, it's I know it sounds pretty simple. It's a fairly it's a regimen in a system that it took us a long time to set up. I set it up myself, not knowing what I was getting into, and I'm glad that I did it that way, because that's the beauty of being naive. You don't know enough to scare you, right? So now when I look back at this network we built, it's like, wow, that's pretty complex. But when you're on the ground level doing it all the time, it does make sense to us right now. So basically, yeah, so you want a radio station, you phone us up, we put it together for you, we ship it out to you, and Bob's your uncle. Sorry. Your radio station is on the air. And we do that with there's certain stations that we'll provide the scheduling for, and certain stations in some of the larger markets, they will do their own scheduling, and we'll just provide all of the imaging. Like, that's all the stuff that goes on in between the songs. We even have gotten into we've got customized jingles that we'll set up for our clients as well. So it's basically, we are able to package this radio station product up and send it over the internet to them, and everything we do resides in the cloud, so it's always easy for them to access information. For example, on our country stations, we just had unfortunately, Loretta Lynn, country superstar, passed away this week, and what we did right away is we got on producing tributes to her, and we sent it out to all our affiliates and let them know that, we're going to be doing a tribute to Loretta Lynn at this time. Here's all your imaging, all the parts you're going to need to put that together. So it's a pretty slick delivery we have. And again, thank you to the internet for making it all possible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So when meeting with clients, what would you say would be like what they need to have prepared before they would come to you to receive these sorts of like templates for these stations?
Well, I think what happens is that all they need to tell us is they want our format, whether it's Bob or Hank.
Yeah.
And really, the things that I need right off the top are what are some really big localisms in the marketplace, because we like to, I mean, listen, one of the things that's very, very important in radio is that you're local, that you sound local, that you're representing the local interests of the population. One of the opportunities that we always saw was that prior to delivering formats via the internet, radio stations would receive them via satellite. And there was always a little bit of room to, at the top of the hour, maybe to allow for some, local content or whatever. But yeah, you could basically tell it was a piped in format. With the way we do things, you'll never know that, the programming's coming from LaSalle. I mean, it sounds like the market that it's in, whether it's Panama City, Florida, or Salt Lake City. I mean, it sounds like it's local, and that's very, very important. So I need to get the local information from them, and the other thing that I need is to find out what automation system they're on, so that we can make sure that our imaging and so forth gels with their system.
I think that's so important, because you look at even like McDonald's that tries to be standardized, and yet if you go to McDonald's in like China, for example, they still have these local delicacies that they add onto their menu there to appeal to the local market. So yeah, I think that's
it's getting the local the local gist of a market is really important. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is that and the other thing too is there's so many choices now, right? I mean, radio, it's not just the terrestrial FM platform. It's now streaming. It's now it's everything. So yeah, you have to really be mindful of what what the client wants.
And you mentioned something very interesting earlier about how in your early days of radio, they kind of allowed you to make mistakes and learn from those experiences. Is that, I guess I would kind of like to hear about like delving more into those kind of mistakes, and how have you adopted that philosophy going into these stations you've made?
Well, this is it's very important to be able to allow your employees to fail, because how are they gonna find out, right? Mm-hmm. What's happened in radio today is that it's become very top down. What happens is that, in many cases, again, I deal with American stations, but I'll tell you, in Canada, I mean, some of the bigger companies like Bell, Chorus, I mean, though a lot of the marketing decisions, a lot of that is not happening at the local market level. It happens at the, in Toronto somewhere. I personally could never work like that. That's why I think I'm at a great time in life when, I can be the person on the ground. It's almost better being on the outside looking in. But I'll tell you an interesting story of making mistakes. Like, what had happened was when I think back to starting Bob, that was that I don't think that could ever happen today.
Why is that?
Because what happened is that this is back in 1999, 2000. I was working with Chum, and we had bought a radio station called Magic 99.9. And I was also program director of Q94, which was a giant of a radio station, very successful, always had been. It was just, it was on steroids. I think at one time, if yeah, it was like we had like a 21 share of the marketplace, which was, unheard of. And along came Magic 99.9. We bought it, and we thought, okay, so 99.9 is this, it's an also ran to what Q94 was. We needed to figure what we were going to do with it. Was it, if we kept it the way it was, it would probably eat into Q94's, ratings and so forth. And we figured, why do formats? So what happened was I was I was at a friend's 40th birthday party. It was in Sanford, Manitoba. And what happened was that when they had this, my friend's party was outside of the Sanford Arena, and they had these a flatbed trailer with these big speakers on it, right? Everybody knew I was in radio. So I show up at this party and they're saying, hey, Howard, sorry, but we're not going to play your wimpy radio station. We're going to be playing music today from the station that rocks, City FM. And I says, oh, okay. And full disclosure, 92 City FM was always my favorite radio station, right? And so, so they said, yeah, this is going to be fun tonight. We're going to be playing music from when we grew up. And I says, well, hang on a second, guys. I get it. You want to rock tonight, but like a lot of the music they're playing, like, Jimi Hendrix, like the Doors, the Animals. Those are bands that they were around before we were around. That's older music. Like the bands that we came of age with, aren't they like, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Boston and Meatloaf? Like, aren't those the artists? And they're going, yeah. They're so. Anyways, whenever you get people talking about music, it's a subject you can go really, really deep on. And there's over 100 people at this party, and it's almost like I'm sitting there going, we got like a focus group around this big bonfire of all these people talking about music and stuff. And that night I came home and I figured there's something to this, because I've always felt like I was too young to be a Generation Xer and too old to be a baby boomer. I always felt kind of lost in there. So what happened is that I figured, come on, there's got to be more people like me. And this party showed that there's people like me that aren't getting the music that they like on one radio station. So what I did is I went and there's a fellow named Joel Whitburn. He is he's unfortunately just passed away recently, but he would produce these pop annuals. Maybe you guys have seen them before. It's all the songs that were hits on Billboard, how long they were, charting, who the artist was, so forth and so forth. And what I did is I went into this book and I started at the year I was 10 years old. And I started thinking, okay, so in this year I was listening to this, and I came up with this, huge playlist. And I brought it back to the radio station, and I talked with the fellow that does research for us. His name was Mike Dorn, and we talked to the owner of the station, Jim Waters, super nice guy. And we said, listen, we got this idea for a format. And he goes, okay. And I says, listen, this is going to sound weird, but we're thinking of a format that plays this music. And please remember that I'm of the generation of, we made mixtapes all the time, right? That we take to the lake and we, exchange with our friends. At the time this was all happening, Napster was raging. And what was happening is that people were making playlists and, these crazy, mixtapes. And it was just something that was happening at the time when this population was at this population bulge of people my age was at this certain point in time. You had Napster going on, and we had a radio station looking for a new format. And it's like, whoa, what an opportunity. And so we pitched it. I pitched it to the owners of the company. I said, listen, like, what happens if we have I want to do a radio station that plays music that's nobody's playing in the marketplace. I mean, sure, these guys are playing classic rock over here. You know, they're playing the Rolling Stones and they're playing, you know, Eddie Money, and they're playing Poison, but nobody is playing this song from the Rolling Stones. And I use Harlem Shuffle as a good example. And nobody is playing Material Girl from Madonna, and nobody is playing David Bowie, Ashes to Ashes. Like, nobody's playing these songs on the same station. And they went, okay, interesting. And another thing, he says, let's come up with an idea for a radio station that's not, you know, the Eagle or some inanimate object like, you know, 102.5 The Prairie or something like that, or the lake or anything. I says, let's give it a name. Let's call it Bob, right? Because everybody has an Uncle Bob. Everybody knows a Bob. Yeah, I mean, so they said, yeah, that's a great idea, Howard. Let's try it. And I was like, okay. Now, the thing is that they gave us the opportunity to try this idea. And with the understanding that, you know, hey, listen, you know, we trust you to do this, but you understand if it fails, you know, there's consequences, obviously, like anything, right? But the fact that we were allowed to do it was amazing. And so what we did do is we took this format idea and we tested it in a research study, and it came back like the hole in the market was absolutely humongous. So that gave us some real confidence. Not enough confidence to start it exactly when the rating periods started. So we kind of started it 2 weeks into the ratings, so that if it didn't take off like it should, then at least we'd have the excuse of, well, you know, we launched this format 2 weeks into the ratings. And so we did. We launched it 2 weeks into the ratings, and of course it took off like wildfire. It was like, you know, I did this little mini tracking study beside as we launched the format, and I was looking at these numbers and I was going, holy smokes, this is like really big. And yeah, it just took off. And I think when the ratings came out, it was like, you know, it was number one in every demo. It was number 112 plus, number 118, you know, 34, 1849, 2554, 2554 women, 2554 men. So it was a big deal. And from that, from little old Winnipeg, that format kind of grew to the rest of North America. So that's the idea. And it taught me something. It taught me that, you know, listen, I'm sure people have this idea before, right? But the thing is that there's one thing between having an idea and enacting on an idea. And it's much like what you guys are doing. This is a great idea that you guys have. And I'm sure there's other people that have the same, you know, have ideas like this, but not everybody acts on these ideas. And that's why I use this lesson is that, yeah, you know what? Sure. You know, we came up with a format. It was super successful. It's not like, you know, I'm a genius or anything. It's just that we decided that, hey, you know what? Let's take a shot at it. Right. You don't hit the balls you don't swing at. So I guess my long roundabout story is, you know, we actually went out on a limb and the dividends paid off. Now there have been, you know, certain opportunities where I've taken a swing at and failed miserably. Yeah, you don't score the points you don't swing the bat or shoot the puck for. So that's my story.
Well, that's great advice too. Because as you touched on, there are so many people that are just like, you know, they have an idea and they're like, oh, if only I could, you know, get it made, but they don't, you know, put the energy in to do it like yourself. So
yeah, I mean, it takes work. It really does. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, if you're passionate and you love what you do, a lot of times it doesn't seem like work. It seems like this, you know, it seems like an enjoyable mission. So I still feel that way, even at this age and stage of my career where, you know, a lot of guys are retiring and stuff. I just love doing what I do, you know, so.
We were talking about artists on the radio, and I just kind of want to backtrack a bit because I get approached every day and twice on Sunday by artists wanting to get their song played on the radio. So I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that. Now, I can't sing to save my life, but first, let's just suppose I could for a second, and I wanted my music featured. Would you be able to walk me through the process of how I could realistically get airplay for my song?
Mac, this is something that is becoming, I mean, it always has been difficult,
Right.
but it is getting more difficult
Okay.
as time goes on. As radio consolidates, you have less decision makers. You have, it used to be that, you could break a song in, why is a good example? I remember there was a song, a group by the name of Sheriff. This is in the 80s. They had a song called When I'm With You. They were a Canadian band, and they had a song called When I'm With You. And that song was picked up by a disc jockey in Las Vegas, of all places, and he played it. And, people went nuts over it. And that song, I think it was released in 81 or something like that. And then I think this would have been in 1988. So that song never went anywhere. And then 7 years later, some guy plays it on the radio in Vegas, and it became like this humongous #1 hit. Because, it was a regional hit, and it spread out, and it had a story behind it. And, it had a life of its own. Today, it's a bit of a different story, because I hate to say it, but you pretty much need to be working with, with a big label that you do have, or maybe you have some amazing kind of viral story happening on TikTok or YouTube to tell. I think those types of platforms, they've almost taken the place of the A&R guy who the label used to have on staff, who actually went out and saw bands and discovered bands in nightclubs and signed them to the record label. That's taken place of that. And the other thing that's happened is the record labels now, they've become more 360 marketing partners, right? So what'll happen is that a record label will be, it's not going to take a chance and sign you. It's going to look at, what kind of story do you have to tell? How are you doing in these markets? How many hits do you have here? How many hits do you have there? I mean, hits when I mean like Shazam hits, or what kind of digital, fingerprint as your band left. And now that they're your 360 marketing partner, they're also going to be the guys that, split everything 50-50, right down to t-shirts, publishing, and so forth. So it becomes a very, very crowded field, and it becomes very, very difficult to get into something like this. And that means that, people are always looking for the easiest way, the easiest ramp to the freeway. And I think that the internet has become the resting stop before radio, before terrestrial radio, because radio used to be like, FM radio, terrestrial radio used to be the tastemaker. Unfortunately, what's happened is that I think now the internet's become a tastemaker, right? And you have stories that are happening on the internet that, the record labels look at to, lessen their risk, if you will. I mean, a record label's model always used to be, 5% of your roster pays for 95% of the other part of your roster, right? And in some ways, that model is now become the streaming model, but it's even smaller, because probably 3% of the artists that are streaming on Spotify or Deezer or Apple Music, they're the ones that are, that are making bank. The other ones are getting crumbs. So to your question about radio airplay, it's a very difficult thing to happen, but there are always ways that people are trying to make that happen, because as long as there's money to be made, in getting a hit on the radio, you're going to find ways for somebody to try and game the system. And, that's where, payola, raises its ugly head. So, there's a lot of unethical ways people are trying to get songs on the radio and so forth. Payola's, obviously one of them. I'm not saying that's how you get a song on the radio, but I'm just saying that that's one of the, one of the things that people are one of the routes people are taking to, to get their music heard.
And so let's say an artist is able to get their music on the radio. Would you be able to share kind of how they make money off that and maybe what those numbers would look like?
Okay, that's a really interesting, an interesting thing, because what happens is that radio airplay is still the place where an artist is going to make the most money and get the most top of mind recognition. I think the metrics on radio work out to 9 cents a song, let's say, right? Where Spotify is like what, 0.00345 a cent.
Maybe another zero in there.
Yeah. So, but seeing that Spotify and the streaming services are easier nut to crack than radio, because you can just upload your tracks and you don't need to get signed, people are looking at that again as being the ramp to the radio, if that makes sense. Now, Spotify, for example, I mean, it's just the numbers are actually absolutely amazing. In that, they as of 2021, I think they paid something like 23 billion in royalties to music rights holders, and over 5 billion in 2020 alone, up from 3 billion in 2017. And the thing that, the interesting or the good news is that, you look at it and you go, okay, 70% goes to the artist and 30% to Spotify, which sounds great. But if you dive deeper into those numbers, you'll find that it's really not that much, right? I mean, do the math. If you get I'd looked this up actually earlier today. And, everybody talks about, there's lots of, things on YouTube about, getting 1 million streams, like working towards getting 1 million streams. That's a huge amount, right? But from a actual, money or revenue standpoint, really, it's nothing, right? I mean, because if you're talking about 1 million streams, and let's say Spotify is, 4 cents a play, you're looking at 1 million streams is netting you $4,000, right? And then if you look at Apple Music, who pays a little bit higher, let's say the 5 cent range, you're looking at, $5,000. Tidal will pay $12,000 for 1 million streams. Deezer, 4,700. Amazon, 5,000. YouTube, 1,750, and SoundCloud, 13,000 or $1,300. And then, of course, now you think, oh, geez, well, 100,000 streams is great. Well, that's really, now you're on Spotify, you've gone from $4,000 to $400.
Right.
So, and again, these results, might be lower based on certain factors, such as only half your song was listened to. So the internet is a big proving ground for a lot of people, because that's the easiest place to get onto, and at least you have a story to tell. Okay. Radio, assuming you get your songs on the radio, that is a better experience as far as payment goes, because what happens is that, radio station, it'll have to, I'll explain this is a little bit, not complex, but it's a little bit, there's some subjective thoughts in what I'm telling you right now, but the bottom line is that radio royalties, they've always paid better. So that's why people are always trying to get on the radio, right? Because it's a better payment system. And for a radio station, what radio does is it acquires a blanket license from the performance rights societies. And when a song is played on the radio and the airplay gets reported to the Performance Rights Society, And from there, the Performance Rights Society, they divvy out the royalties to the songwriters and the publishers. And that's how the songwriter gets paid. In Canada, we have a pretty good system. If you're a songwriter and a performer, because in Canada, both the songwriter and the performer, they get compensated. Okay. Canadian radio stations, we pay a certain percentage of our gross billings to a performance rights organization like SOCAN, who in turn pay out that money to the songwriter and the publisher. We also pay out, radio in Canada also pays out a further percentage. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's maybe 1 or 1.5% of its gross revenue to Resound, which is a performance rights organization specifically set up to collect royalties for the performer of a song. And interestingly enough, they do this around the world pretty much the same way, except in the United States, where the performer doesn't get paid. That's because the U.S. hasn't signed on to the 1961 Rome Convention, which basically recognizes the rights of recording artists and royalties to be paid to the person that created them. So actually, the U.S. is just one of 4 countries not paying royalties to recording artists. And their primary justification for not doing that is in most U.S. groups, radio play is public, okay? And means it should be covered by the public performance royalties. Every time, you have, bars and arenas and stadiums, they all pay a certain amount of their gross revenue into the Performance Rights Society. So they feel that that money is already being looked at or looked after. That's why that hasn't happened in the US. Now, the process of reporting your plays to a radio, the process of reporting how much your song has been played on the radio has always been a pretty problematic setup, because the scale of radio programming has always, meant a lot of human error and so forth. And over the last, in the last decade or so, there have been institutions set up like Mediabase and BDS Radio, which electronically monitors airplay, so you can get a really every song is digitally fingerprinted, so you'll always be able to find out when and where that song played. So that is how, in a long-about way, that is how artists get paid on the radio side of things, and how they get paid on the streaming side of things.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. So delving into like kind of the streaming end, Mac and I had learned from you earlier that you had experience curating playlists to match listeners' preferences. I was wondering if you could share the process of doing that in radio and other formats, and how you ended up going down that route in your career.
Well, that's actually a really good question. And it was a very interesting experience. I got a mysterious email one day, a number of years ago, from someone in England. And they said they heard that I was a music guy and I was really into music and I knew my music. And of course, they'd known my success with the Bob format. And they asked if I was interested in putting together a bunch of playlists based on certain criteria. The social and political side of Lynyrd Skynyrd, great rock songs to work out to. They even asked me to make a playlist, which threw me off, on a great Manitoba social, right? And I figured, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, they asked me if I was interested, and I said, yeah, sure, I was interested. And I signed a number of NDAs. And then I started putting these playlists together and sending them off to this address. And I was getting paid in British pounds, which back then was really nice. It was like almost 2 to 1, right? And this went on for about 6 to 9 months. And then one day I got a call from a fellow named Denzel Feigelson. He turns out to be the guy who, Steve Jobs hired years ago to help build the original iTunes store. And so basically, he let me know that, hey, thanks for the work you've been doing. Just so you know, we just launched something called Apple Music. And yeah, that's when I found out that's what I'd been working on. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, of course, it's grown. I think actually some of my playlists from years ago are still on there. But it was a great experience. Curating these playlists, and really, it's something that it really, the apple does not fall too far from the tree for what I would do on a daily basis, because on a daily basis we create playlists for our for our clients, whether it's country or whether it's the Bob format or whatever. So it was a lot of fun. It was and the thing that I always appreciated about Apple Music is that it was curated by human beings. It wasn't the algorithm doing it, which was so there was and their playlists, I've always felt there's a lot of thought that goes into into putting them together. So it was a lot of fun.
Sounds that.
For sure. What kind of songs would go into a great Manitoba social playlist?
Oh geez. Okay. Well, you would have to have ABBA Dancing Queen would be in there. And then AC/DC, You Shook Me All Night Long, and I Knew the Bride When She Used to Rock and Roll. That's probably a those are three staples.
I beat that the weekend, so I'm taking notes.
Oh, there you go. Exactly. Yeah. Have those songs ever come across as requests for you?
Oh, Dancing Queen all the time.
Dancing Queen. How about I Knew the Bride?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one too. And that's a great song. It's yeah. AC/DC, of course, you have to have AC/DC. AC/DC, they kind of break out just as the food arrives, right?
Mm-hmm. I usually play Thunderstruck and then Highway to Hell throughout the night.
There you go. Very typical for a marriage social. Yes.
And then so like you come across a lot of contacts, and you've more than likely partnered with many people that have helped you to expand the Kroeger Media brand. So what was the process like as you started, and how did you know which partnerships would be mutually beneficial?
That's another good question. And I think it's easy because for me, it was whoever could get the word out about what we did, that they would be a great partner. And, conversely, there's a passion about what we do. We really love doing what we do, and we like making our clients happy. We like, we like providing them with a great product that, rings their cash registers, and we love to keep them saying, yes, we love what you're doing. Good radio. There's always a difference between good radio and great radio. And I've always looked for, that's the benefit about when you work on your own. You can choose, who you want to work with. And excuse my language, but I mean, you don't have to work with assholes if you don't want to. And we really, we've surrounded our, we've had to fire some clients before, but for the most part, like 99% of the clients we have, our attrition rate is very, very small. From when we started 16 years ago, we've grown. We've never regressed in our client base. And if we do lose a client, usually it's because, there's might be a signal issue, or there's a strategy in the market that they might want to employ other than using our format as a classic hits format. But it's usually, for every one we lost, we've usually got two back. So again, we've looked for, the benefit of working on your own is you seek these people out, and it's the law of universal attraction, right? It's like you put it out there and it tends to come back to you. You keep the client happy, and they keep coming back. They really keep coming back, and you be very transparent and very honest with them as well. That's a really important thing to do too.
100%.
Yeah.
And would you say there was kind of like an evolution in finding these partnerships as you became more established and made a better name for yourself in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, what ends up happening is that once you do have a, a modicum of success or a success story behind you, I mean, people do want to work with you. And I mean, the selling point, it it uh it becomes a little easier. But I've always, I've always felt that A, be grateful for what you're doing, and B, realize that no matter how successful you are, it could all come crashing down tomorrow for whatever reason. And I think if you remain grateful and you remain vigilant to the fact that, yeah, you know what, things could, I mean, I'm not saying you have to be pessimistic all the time, still be optimistic, but realize that it takes work to stay where you are. And when you stop growing is when you either, get out of the business or, you're dead. So it's a lesson that, my parents, I think about, what they taught me is, my dad, I mean, he lived till he was 86, and that guy never stopped learning, right? I mean, he was, if he wasn't working on his golf swing in his 80s, he was reading up about, a new species of birds in Africa. I mean, my mom was the same way. So it's that ability to be able to, appreciate what you got and be grateful for what you have, but always, look ahead. Don't look back.
100%. Yeah. When the lion sleeps at night, there's somebody, working harder than you to try and
Yeah.
and surpass you, for sure.
Yeah.
And you touched on payola earlier, so I wanted to get down there a bit. So,
The nasty payola thing. Well, the thing that's payola, it's interesting. It's always had a very, the day radio was invented was the day payola was invented, probably. If you think about it, payola really is illegal only if you didn't claim it. And of course, it comes in many forms. In the old days, those stuffed envelopes of cash might arrive at a program director's office. I never got them. They would arrive at your office in lieu of maybe adding an artist to a station's, playlist, moving the song up the charts. Over time, it got a little more sophisticated. Pretty soon labels, hired independent promoters to approach stations with a budget to get a song added. And, that budget might include, advertising, advertising on billboards or then put money towards, products like T-shirts or bumper stickers that, talk about both the radio station and the record label. The bottom line is getting a hit on radio always meant huge financial rewards to everybody. So the labels in the industry, they got pretty good at finding ways to do it. And I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but if you can find it, Rolling Stone did a really good article on this about 3 or 4 years ago. They did a story on how, like in 2005, what happened in the US is that there was a big crackdown on pay for play. But it never went away. I mean, it just took on different forms, right? And Rolling Stone, they tackled this subject and they did a really good job. But they did have an example on there just to tell you, just to show you how many different forms it takes. They had a story on there about a manager of a band who spent about 10 grand through a third party, directly paying these DJs who were working at a rhythmic or urban format to play a single. And the payments, of course, strategically employed to, boost the singer's the spins. And then when the label eventually did sign the artist, the manager was able to earn his money back. Right. So, I mean, that's how sophisticated it gets. And then from Payola's standpoint, there's a gray area. Okay. I remember when Celine Dion was first came out in the early 90s. I was working at Q94, and I mean, the record company, they really made you feel like, you were a big part of her success. They would bring Celine down to the radio station. She'd sit down with you and, I mean, she wasn't the mega superstar she is now, but she was just this young lady. She sat down, very, very friendly, and we sit down and talk about what singles we thought were great or what songs should be singles and so forth. And then the record companies would go, oh man, this is, you've done such a good job, working with Celine and everything. Why don't you come out and see her at the Diamond Club? So they'd fly out to the Diamond Club to go, in Toronto for the weekend to go see Celine play. And then later on, they'd fly out to some of these bigger things. Now, when you look back at it, you go, okay, so is that paying somebody to get on board, or is that, or is that paying somebody to get on board to push this artist and have a vested interest in her? Yeah, there is actually. But is it by sending somebody to Toronto for the weekend to go see her play? Does that mean that they're going to increase this record, for a few spins? Yeah, I'm sure that some guys did, right? Honestly, I never did. But, is that like, where does that fall, on the payola scale? If you are, promoting an artist that is a core artist for the radio station, you're darn right you're gonna, make sure that you play that song because your audience loves it, and that's why they listen to your radio station. So there's different ways to look at it, but the blatant third party independent promoter thing, which still goes on, I'm sure it still goes on. That is, where you'll see artists getting, spins, and you're trying to figure out, wait, that I always used to think this, because I was brought up under the tutelage of the Research Group. They were a great research company out of Seattle, and it's somebody that our radio stations employed to help us make decisions, to help us, think about radio in a strategic way. And a lot of times I would think to myself, okay, so this song that is getting so much, so much push by the record companies, why is it testing like a dog? Right. So, I mean, usually, you spin a record because, the audience wants to hear it. But in this case, you'd have a song that would be, like screaming up the charts, but the testing was like at the bottom of the chart. So that would always make me be a bit suspicious. But the bottom line is, as long as there's money to be made, there's people always going to try and find a way to game the system. Today, it's not about, it's not about, cash going into, program directors' pockets. It's, LLCs and cash apps in the US. So again, as long as there's a big money tied to an artist and tied to an artist doing well, going up the charts, there's going to be payola. So
yeah, that's the reality.
Yeah.
So we're coming to an end to our questions here, Howard, but if there was anything we missed or something you were hoping we were going to ask and we didn't, I'd like to open the floor and give you a chance to add anything you'd like.
You know what, Ben? I think that's pretty much it. I think we covered everything. I think we did good.
Hear about everything.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate, the time and how detailed and honest you were in your answers. And I want to let you know you're always welcome to come back on the podcast. And I know we'll keep in touch. We'll continue communicating. In the meantime, though, that is going to conclude this episode. For those watching, keep working hard, keep working smart, keep exploring new opportunities, and let Howard be an inspiration to yourself, that dreams and success become a reality with hard work, dedication, and an openness to learn. And if you want to learn more about Howard and his company, you can do so on the website, KroegerMedia.com. Howard, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Keep up the good work, you guys, and thanks for having me on. I've really appreciated it.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you. And for those watching, I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you reach your goals. Until next time, take care and keep making music.